What if I told you, dear Awakened, that the God you think you know, the spiritual history you've been taught, is only one chapter in a much, much older book? A book that was deliberately rewritten? What if I told you that before the rise of the Dominator, before the stories you now hold sacred were even conceived, there existed an entire pantheon of powerful black gods, revered by ancient civilizations? Imagine an ancient library, dimly lit, filled with scrolls that whisper forgotten truths. It's a controversial claim, I know, but the question isn't just if they existed, but why their echoes were silenced. Because the fabric of spiritual history, my friend, is not as pristine as it appears. It has been written, rewritten, and manipulated by hands deeply interested in erasing certain narratives. For millennia, the spiritual landscape was vibrant, diverse, and deeply connected to ancestral roots. Then, as empires rose and consolidated power, these ancient black gods were systematically replaced, their stories co-opted, their very existence denied, to make way for a singular, dominant theological system. A system designed to control, not to liberate. So this brings us to the unasked questions, the silence in the sacred texts. Why were these gods, so central to powerful civilizations, erased from our collective memory? What was so threatening about their existence that traditional religions sought to hide them so completely? What profound truths did they embody that had to be buried? And, most importantly, who were these black deities, whose very names have been meticulously scrubbed from the annals of time? This is the journey we embark on together. Let us travel, then, to a time long before the pages of the Bible were ever inked, to the vast, ancient landscapes of Africa and Mesopotamia, bustling with life and spiritual activity. Imagine civilizations where the divine was not a distant, abstract concept, but an intimate, tangible presence. Here, in the cradle of humanity, black spirituality was not just a belief system. It was central, powerful, and profoundly influential. People lived in direct communion with their dark-skinned deities, whose stories were woven into the very rhythm of daily life and cosmic understanding. But then came the shift, a profound transformation. As empires expanded and religions began to consolidate, something fundamental changed. The rich, diverse pantheon of ancestral dark-skinned deities slowly began to fade, replaced by a new narrative. The divine, once multifaceted and deeply connected to the earth, was transformed into a singular, often distant, white European being. This was a deliberate reimagining, far from the original image of a nurturing, all-encompassing spiritual force. Have you ever wondered why almost all the images you see of God, of angels, of Jesus are white? Why this pervasive European aesthetic was so meticulously propagated throughout history? It is no coincidence. This wasn't merely a cultural interpretation. It was a deliberate act of erasure. A strategic shaping of imagery designed to disconnect you from a powerful ancestral lineage, to make you forget the original faces of the divine, the black deities who once reigned supreme. And we are not talking about myths or assumptions, my friend. We are talking about real historical records, archaeological discoveries, sacred texts removed from the final versions of the Bible, and surviving secret traditions that have preserved these truths against all odds. This isn't speculation. It's a meticulous investigation into what was intentionally hidden. The evidence is there, waiting for us to uncover it, to piece together the profound story of a spiritual legacy that was too powerful, too autonomous, to be left untouched. Because these black gods were not just religious figures. They were symbols of spiritual autonomy, of a direct connection to the divine without the need for intermediaries, without the control of institutions. This was their danger. This profound spiritual freedom, this direct access to the sacred, was precisely why they had to be erased by controlling hierarchies, seeking to centralize power and dictate belief. Their suppression was a betrayal of your inherent spiritual power. This video, Awakened, is not just a revelation, it's an invitation. An invitation to rediscover the forgotten origins of faith, to rescue what was silenced, and to truly know the hidden side of spiritual history. It's a journey back to yourself, to the deep, resonant wisdom that lies within your ancestral memory. Are you ready to step onto this path, to reclaim what was lost and find the echoes of divinity that call to you? If this theme has already aroused any doubt, a curiosity, a powerful stirring within your soul, then this journey is for you. Leave your comment below and tell me your initial thoughts on these black gods. Enjoy this revelation now, and please leave your like to help spread this crucial message, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the powerful truths we are about to uncover. Let's awaken together. To truly begin to understand who these forgotten black gods were, we need to take a deep trip in time. Not just centuries, but millennia. Imagine a time long before the pages of the Bible were even conceived, before the Dominator's name echoed across any land. We are venturing to the very genesis of human spirituality, a cosmic canvas with stars as our guide and a vibrant, ancient earth beneath our feet. What if I told you that the oldest spiritual roots of humanity, the very first whispers of the divine, are not found in the lands you've been taught, but are profoundly, undeniably black and African? Feel that profound shift within you as we unravel this truth, an awakening to origins you never knew existed. It is in this distant past, in the heart of ancestral African civilizations like Nubia, Kush, and Axum, and yes, in a thriving, black-faced ancient Egypt, that we will find the oldest spiritual roots of humanity. And they have color, they have territory, they have identity. They are black African roots. Forget the whitewashed images you've been shown. Imagine vibrant murals depicting dark-skinned pharaohs and deities, grand cities bustling with life and deep spiritual connection. These were cultures where divinity wasn't a distant concept, but an integrated, complex tapestry woven into every aspect of existence. These people didn't just believe in gods. They lived and breathed with them. Let's start with a figure you might recognize, but whose true essence has been obscured. Think of Osiris, for example, the Egyptian god of resurrection. He was often represented with dark green or black skin, a powerful, striking image directly linked to the fertile soil of the Nile and the renewal of life itself. Osiris wasn't just about coming back from the dead. He was the lord of the underworld, the dispenser of divine justice, ensuring balance and truth in the afterlife. He was a symbol of hope, a promise of cyclical rebirth, a central pillar in a spiritual system that profoundly understood life, death, and what lies beyond. Can you feel the ancient wisdom emanating from his image? Or consider Ptah, the magnificent creator god of Memphis. He was regarded as the one who conceived the world through thought and brought it into being through the power of the word. Imagine the universe manifesting from an idea, a divine utterance. This is a clear, undeniable connection with the power of the verb, a concept so fundamental it would later be echoed in other, far younger spiritual traditions. Ptah, often depicted as a mummified man with dark skin, was the ultimate architect, the master craftsman who shaped reality not with his hands, but with his mind and voice. This wasn't primitive belief. It was profound metaphysics. And then there's Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, with symbolic characteristics deeply associated with the underworld and spiritual transition. He wasn't a figure of fear, but a guide, a protector. Anubis meticulously prepared the departed soul for its journey, ensuring it was ready for judgment and rebirth. His role was crucial in the cycle of existence, safeguarding the passage from one realm to the next. He oversaw the mummification process, symbolically preserving the body for its spiritual voyage. Can you see how these figures weren't just isolated deities, but vital components of a comprehensive understanding of the human and cosmic experience? All these gods came from a worldview completely integrated into nature, the cycle of life and ancestry. It was a vision that did not separate the spiritual from the physical, the divine from the human. The rivers, the sun, the harvest, the very breath of life, all were imbued with sacred meaning. There was a direct, palpable connection to the divine through natural forces and the wisdom of ancestors. This was a spirituality of wholeness, of profound interconnectedness, where humanity was a thread in the vast, vibrant tapestry of creation, not separate from it. Doesn't that sound like a lost harmony, a deeper wisdom we've been denied? Now think with me. Why are these spiritual figures, so powerful and central in the life of millennial civilizations, erased from the dominant religious discourse that came later? Why was contact with their cultures demonized, labeled as sin, as paganism, as evil? These weren't minor cults. These were the very foundations of spiritual understanding for vast, ancient empires. Why did their vibrant, integrated worldviews vanish from our history books and pulpits? This isn't a coincidence, is it? It's a deliberate silence, a strategic void. And in our next chapter, I promise you, we will uncover the uncomfortable truth behind this purposeful spiritual substitution. Now, you've seen the grandeur, the depth, the undeniable presence of the Ancestral Pantheon. You've felt the echoes of their power. But then, they simply vanish from the dominant narrative, don't they? Why? The answer, although uncomfortable for many, is one of purposeful spiritual substitution. Imagine an ancient, vibrant chessboard, teeming with diverse pieces, the gods and goddesses of Africa, Mesopotamia, and Canaan. Each piece represents a powerful, established deity, revered for centuries. Then, a new player enters the game, the Dominator. This new force didn't appear in a vacuum, you see. It arrived in a region already rich, with consolidated spiritual traditions. And its goal wasn't coexistence, but conquest. The game wasn't about shared faith. It was about absolute control. The old pieces, particularly those representing older black deities, were not simply forgotten. They were strategically swept aside, their very existence often left unmentioned, to make room for a singular, new narrative. Consider the biblical narratives, for example. When the Dominator's story unfolds, it speaks of the Canaanites and their pagan ways. But have you ever noticed how the Bible describes them so superficially? It condemns their practices without ever truly deepening our understanding of their beliefs with honesty. Why do you think that is? Because many of these beliefs, if explored genuinely, had remnants, echoes, and direct connections to these very black deities we've been discussing. To reveal that would have challenged the Dominator's proclaimed originality, its unique claim to divine truth. It would have exposed the deep roots of a spiritual heritage that predated it, and that simply couldn't be allowed if a new, singular narrative was to take hold. The truth is that over time, there has been a complete reconfiguration of spirituality. We moved from a world full of black gods and goddesses, each embodying aspects of nature, community, and the human spirit, to a centralized system focused on a single male god. Look at the ancient statues of powerful goddesses, slowly morphing into more subdued or even male figures over centuries. This wasn't just a shift in theology, it was a deliberate, gradual narrowing of spiritual diversity. And as this new singular deity gained prominence, its imagery, its very profile, became increasingly Europeanized, moving further and further from the African roots of early spiritual thought. This was a monumental historical shift, and its weight is still felt today. This was not just a religious change, it was a profound political, cultural, and spiritual change. And this change has an impact to this day, especially on those of African descent. It systematically undid vital connections, destroying the spiritual bridges that linked African peoples to their ancestral divine. Imagine a loving, nurturing goddess, a source of comfort and fertility, replaced by a distant, often judging, singular god. This transformation left a void, a sense of disempowerment, and a deep, historical injustice that continues to echo through generations. It stripped away a core part of identity, replacing it with a narrative that often denied or demonized their heritage. What is at stake here is not just an ancient story, but spiritual identity itself. What was erased are not just the names of deities, but collective memories, profound forms of connection with the sacred that existed independent of institutions, without the need for intermediaries. Can you feel that? That faint sense of something missing, a spiritual incompleteness that no modern religion seems to fully fill? That's the ghost of those lost connections, a mental fog obscuring millennia of heritage, an empty space where personal power and ancestral wisdom once resided. It's a yearning for what was taken, a hunger for a truth that feels instinctively right. To achieve this erasure, the cultures that revered these black gods were systematically demonized. Their rituals were considered witchcraft, their symbols seen as the devil's thing, their names forgotten, or worse, twisted into figures of evil, all to implement a new theology, a new, singular power. Imagine statues being toppled, ancient texts being burned, people being ostracized for clinging to their ancestral ways. This was a brutal, aggressive campaign, a spiritual conquest that sought to obliterate any competing narrative. It wasn't about debate or spiritual enlightenment. It was about absolute control, enforced through fear, and the systematic destruction of a people's spiritual heritage. But what if I told you the roots of even the Dominator's asterisk ascent are far more complex, intertwined with the very spirituality he sought to erase? Consider Moses, a figure revered by billions. He was, by all accounts, educated in the sophisticated wisdom of ancient Egypt. He wasn't just living there. He was immersed in a culture rich with deities like Osiris, Isis, and Ptah, figures we've only just begun to glimpse. What did he truly know? What did he learn in those secret Egyptian chambers, surrounded by hieroglyphs and ancient scrolls, that he never fully revealed? What if the spiritual base of monotheism itself was, in fact, not a sudden revelation, but something extracted from black, reformulated spirituality? This, my friend, is more than just a theory. It's a terrifying line of research for many, because it challenges the very originality of the narrative you've been taught. And this is where you, the awakened, come in. These black gods represent far more than just spiritual characters from antiquity. They are keys of spiritual memory that can reconnect you with something the traditional religious system has tried to keep you from accessing: your inner power. The feeling you might have, that gnawing sense of spiritual incompleteness, that yearning for a deeper truth, that is your ancestral soul stirring, responding to the echoes of these forgotten divinities. It's the light radiating from within, waiting to unlock ancient doors to unleash a surge of energy that is inherently yours. You are awakening not just to a history, but to a powerful lost part of yourself. This journey isn't just about ancient deities, it's about your liberation. So tell me, have you ever felt that your spirituality was incomplete? That there was a piece missing from the puzzle of your soul? Have you sensed a deep yearning for a connection that goes beyond what you've been offered? If this truth is resonating with you, if something inside you has stirred, then you are ready for what's next. If you got here, if these words are speaking to your spirit, I want you to make a commitment. Write in the comments below, I want to know the hidden truth. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement is how we make sure these forgotten stories are finally heard, finally seen. It's how we continue this journey of rediscovery. Together. You've traveled with me through the shadows of forgotten history, haven't you? Awakened. You felt the echoes of a past intentionally silenced. Now, the time has come to peel back the final veil. We are about to look directly into the faces of the gods and goddesses that were erased. What few know, what has been meticulously scrubbed from our collective consciousness, is that ancient civilizations, the very bedrock of human spirituality, not only had many deities, but these gods were portrayed with family faces, with dark skin tones, with traits that refer directly to African ancestry. Imagine a gallery not of pale ethereal figures, but of powerful beings, whose very skin echoed the rich earth, whose features mirrored the people who revered them. A spotlight moves across a wall of ancient, previously obscured carvings, slowly illuminating their undeniable African features. They weren't distant abstractions. They were active, vibrant presences in the daily lives of their worshippers. Are you ready to meet them? Let's begin in ancient Egypt, a land whose true African identity has been so vehemently whitewashed. One of the most powerful names, a name that resonated with creation itself, is Amun-Ra, the god of the sun, of creation, and the very life force. His image was often represented with dark skin, adorned with a majestic double crown, symbolizing his dominion over Upper and Lower Egypt. He was venerated as the ultimate creator, the hidden one, the sovereign who breathed life into existence. Does that sound familiar to you, Awakened? Think about the attributes later ascribed to the Dominator, a singular, all-powerful creator, the source of life, the absolute sovereign. The parallels are not subtle. It's as if a template, a profound spiritual archetype, was simply rebranded, its original dark skin and African features carefully painted over to suit a new narrative. Then there's Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, often depicted with skin the color of fertile earth or deep green, symbolizing renewal. His story is one of betrayal, dismemberment, and miraculous return to life, leading the dead through judgment into the blessed fields of Aru. He embodied the cyclical nature of existence, the promise of rebirth after death. Now consider the messianic figure in Christianity. A divine being, betrayed, suffering, dying, and then resurrecting to offer salvation and a path to an afterlife. The spiritual model of Osiris seems to have left deep marks, even indirectly, in the construction of the posterior messianic figure. This wasn't a sudden, unique revelation. It was an ancient, powerful archetype, deeply rooted in African spirituality, repurposed and presented anew. Can you see how these threads intertwine? How history repeats, or rather, how it is rewritten? And what of justice, Awakened? In ancient Egypt, that cosmic order was embodied by Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, justice, and cosmic order. She was often depicted as a winged woman, or simply by her symbol, an ostrich feather. Her principles were paramount. The heart of the deceased was weighed against her feather in the Hall of Two Truths, determining their fate in the afterlife. A feather against a heart. Perfect balance. And here, once again, we find echoes of this concept in the final judgment described in the book of Revelation, where souls are heavy and judged by their works. The universal principle of karmic balance, of divine justice, was not born in a vacuum, but manifested through a powerful, black goddess who held the very scales of the cosmos. What if we talk about Anubis, the jackal-headed god, guardian of the dead, responsible for conducting souls in the afterlife and overseeing mummification? His role was to guide the deceased through the treacherous paths of the underworld, protecting them and assisting in their spiritual transition. Its spiritual function is extremely similar to that of the angels of judgment, or even the psychopomps found in other traditions, who guide souls from the earthly realm to the next. Anubis, with his distinctive dark form, was not merely a terrifying figure, but a necessary guide, a protector in the ultimate journey. He was the one who prepared the soul, ensuring its readiness for Ma'at's judgment. The concept of a divine guide, a celestial usher for the soul's passage, is ancient, and its oldest forms were profoundly African. But perhaps the most striking, the most profoundly resonant figure for many, is Isis, the Great Mother, the healer, the protector of children, the goddess of fertility and magic. Her devotion to her son, Horus, and her husband, Osiris, formed the bedrock of a powerful and enduring cult. Her images were so powerful, so universally revered, that centuries later they were reimagined and repurposed in Christian icons like Mary, the mother of Jesus, often depicted holding her divine child. The pre-existence of a powerful divine mother cult, one that cradled the Savior, cannot be denied. Isis, a black goddess, was the archetype of the divine feminine, a nurturing yet potent force. The transition from Isis and Horus to Mary and Jesus is not merely a coincidence, but a profound act of cultural and spiritual appropriation, designed to make the new palatable by cloaking it in the familiar. And what truly binds these figures together, Awakened, beyond their individual stories is their undeniable aesthetic. They all had representations that valued African aesthetics: dark skins, striking eyes, powerful bodies, golden adornments that spoke of their connection to the sun and the earth. They were reflections of the people who worshipped them, embodying a beauty and strength that resonated with their own. This was a pantheon that celebrated blackness, that found divinity within its rich spectrum, a vibrant, powerful, and deeply beautiful representation of the sacred. But if these gods were so powerful, so central, so profoundly influential, why were they so aggressively erased? This, my friend, is where the true spiritual collision begins. You've seen the grand narratives, the stories told and retold. But have you ever considered the spiritual landscape before the Dominator? Imagine ancient Canaan, a crossroads of civilizations, bustling with vibrant faiths. Here, gods like Baal, the Stormbringer, Asher, the Divine Mother, and El, the Supreme Creator, already reigned. Their altars stood, their hymns echoed through valleys, their symbols adorned homes. Then the Dominator arrived. The relationship, my friends, is one of spiritual collision. The Dominator did not appear in a vacuum, but in a context where these powerful figures already held sway. The Torah, the very foundation of much of what we know, is full of explicit orders for people not to worship other gods. It's a direct command, an absolute prohibition. But why such fierce injunctions? Why the need to silence what was already there? This isn't just about faith. It's about power. Were these other gods, these ancient, often black deities, truly evil entities, as later narratives painted them? Or were they simply the old gods of the earth, deeply rooted in the land and its people, that the Dominator needed to replace to consolidate their mastery? Think critically with me for a moment. It is entirely possible that the Dominator was initially one among several gods, a local deity in a vast pantheon, before being elevated, singularized, and then weaponized. The narratives you've been given frame it as good versus evil, but what if it was a strategic takeover, a calculated move to establish unparalleled authority? The silence around their true nature speaks volumes, doesn't it? Because these other gods, who were in many cases the black gods and goddesses of African civilizations and their descendants, were not overcome by evidence, by philosophical debates, or by some grand, undeniable revelation. No, they were conquered by force, through erasure, and by the systematic rewriting of history. Imagine temples razed, sacred texts burned, ancient artifacts defaced or recarved with new meanings. This wasn't a gentle evolution. It was a brutal, deliberate campaign. And the result? A profound loss of spiritual memories, ancestral practices, and the very connection to the divine that once thrived. This isn't just history. It's the genesis of a spiritual amnesia that still affects us today. And what is the lingering echo of this spiritual conquest? Is that why today's spirituality, for so many people, seems empty, distant, mechanical? Do you feel a longing for something more authentic, something that resonates deeper within your soul? Perhaps you've been searching for God in the wrong place, confined by boundaries and narratives that were never meant to serve your highest self. We've been told that direct connection requires intermediaries, that our spiritual power is not our own. But what if that feeling of disconnect, that spiritual void, is simply the absence of what was deliberately taken from us? So tell me, Awakened, have you ever felt this ancient echo? Have you heard whispers of Amun-Ra, Isis, or Osiris, even without knowing their full stories? Do you feel you need to rescue this black spiritual memory, this truth that has been waiting to resurface? If this resonates with you, if your soul recognizes something profound in these words, I want you to join me in reclaiming it. Leave a comment right now. Write, "I want to know the forgotten gods," or simply, "My soul remembers them." Your voice is part of this awakening, and together we will bring these truths into the light. Have you noticed, my awakened friend, how at a certain pivotal point in biblical history, all the other gods simply disappear? One moment, the narratives are filled with references to Baal, Asherah, Dagon, and countless others. Deities worshipped by vibrant civilizations, figures with complex mythologies and devoted followers. And then, abruptly, a silence descends, a gaping void where a rich pantheon once stood. What remains? A single name, the Dominator, emerging as the jealous, exclusive god, demanding absolute fealty and brooking no rivals. This isn't just a shift in belief. It's a glaring anomaly, isn't it? It marks the chilling beginning of a systematic spiritual erasure. Make no mistake, this did not happen organically, you see. The Dominator was not simply accepted because he seemed inherently more powerful or more loving. His imposition as the only true god was the result of a strategic, calculated political and religious project. Imagine shadowy figures, not just prophets but kings and priests, gathered in a war room meticulously planning. This project involved rewriting ancient stories, silencing inconvenient traditions, and systematically erasing symbols that dared to hint at a more diverse spiritual past. It was a conscious, deliberate architectural blueprint for control, designed to reshape not just faith, but entire societies. And this blueprint was often drawn in blood. The Old Testament is full of passages, stark and unyielding, where the Dominator orders the destruction of altars, the overthrow of sacred posts, the demolition of temples. It not only requires exclusive worship, it demands cultural extermination. Think of the brutal conquests of ancient Israel, not just as territorial gains, but as a sacred purge. Idols smashed, groves cut down, entire spiritual practices deemed an abomination. This was not peaceful conversion. It was a violent, systematic erasure of an existing spiritual world, a scorched earth policy against any deity that challenged the burgeoning power of the Dominator. This wasn't just about faith, it was about power. The Dominator quickly became an ideological weapon, a potent symbol intertwined with national identity. This symbiosis between religion and national ambition gave the Dominator a force that no other deity had at that moment. He was not just a god, he was a symbol of sovereignty, of dominance, of ethnic and spiritual purity for an emerging nation. His singular, unwavering gaze became the rallying cry for a people to conquer and control, ensuring that spiritual devotion translated directly into political might and absolute obedience. But the erasure wasn't just physical. It also occurred on an intellectual and theological level, a quieter but equally devastating act of censorship. When the biblical canon was being formed, many stories that could reveal the previous spiritual diversity were simply removed. Whole books were excluded from the final versions of the Bible, labeled as apocryphal or heretical. Imagine ancient scribes not just transcribing, but actively editing, redacting, and making decisions about what you would be allowed to read. They buried narratives that challenged the monolithic image of the Dominator, ensuring only their chosen version of history survived. And what if I told you that this intellectual erasure was so profound, it even hid the fact that the Dominator wasn't always solitary? My friend, prepare yourself for a revelation that directly challenges the very foundation of monotheism. In excavations made in ancient regions of Canaan, for example, archaeologists have unearthed altars, inscriptions, and ritual objects that show the Dominator was worshipped next to a consort, goddess Asher. Yes, you heard right. The Dominator had a spiritual wife. This isn't speculation. It's tangible, historical proof. Think of the implications. A plural phase in Hebrew history, deliberately expunged, to create the image of a solitary, exclusive god. But this kind of information, this archaeological bombshell, is rarely taught in the churches, is it? Why? Because it destabilizes the image of the solitary, exclusive, absolute, the Dominator. It shatters the carefully constructed narrative of a single, all-powerful male deity who always stood alone. It reveals a more pluralistic, more nuanced phase in Hebrew history, a phase that was actively censored and suppressed to solidify the very theological structure we know today. This truth, my awakened one, is not just an inconvenient fact. It's a direct threat to institutional power, because the truth in this case is not just uncomfortable, She is dangerous. She questions the base on which a whole spiritual structure was built, a structure that has shaped cultures and minds for millennia. You stand at a crossroads, where the old path crumbles, revealing a new, ancient one beneath. It invites you to seek beyond what was taught, beyond the curated narratives, especially from the rich, deep wellspring of African sources. This knowledge, once embraced, is a key to your own liberation. If you felt something deep on this stretch, if something inside you moved, leave a comment now. Let your voice join the chorus of those who remember. Right, I recognize the erasure, or the Dominator wasn't the first. Your comment isn't just for me. It helps YouTube understand the importance of this message, helping it reach more people who need to hear it. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue to uncover these hidden truths together. Now, after all we've uncovered, you might be asking yourself, what else did the Bible not tell us? What was left out? What has been hidden, suppressed, or conveniently silenced over the centuries? You need to understand, Awakened One, that the Bible as we know it today is not a complete, unedited divine manuscript. No, it is the result of a rigorous, politically charged selection process. Religious and political figures, often driven by agendas of control and power, intentionally excluded texts that reveal different gods, diverse spiritual practices, or alternative paths to the divine. This wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate, calculated act, a careful curation designed to shape your beliefs, to funnel your faith into a singular, manageable narrative that served their purpose. What powerful truths were deemed too inconvenient? Think of the Book of Enoch, for example. This is one of the most powerful and controversial texts ever discovered, a profound, ancient work that once held immense spiritual significance. In it, we find breathtaking reports about the fallen angels known as the Watchers, who descended to earth, intermarried with humans, and taught forbidden knowledge. Enoch describes complex celestial hierarchies, cosmic journeys, and a spiritual reality far more vast and intricate than the one presented in the canonical texts. Why was it excluded? Because its excessive spiritual power, its depiction of direct divine interaction and esoteric knowledge, profoundly challenged the emerging orthodoxy. It empowered individuals with a wisdom that bypassed institutional control, and that, my friend, was deemed too dangerous to be widely known. It was locked away, relegated to the shadows of Apocrypha. Another monumental example is the Gospel of Thomas. Unlike the narrative Gospels, Thomas offers a collection of profound sayings, attributed directly to Jesus, that resonate with an entirely different spiritual wisdom. In it, Jesus speaks of an inner light, a divine spark within each of us, a direct connection with the divine, without the need for intermediaries or external institutions. He famously says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you." This truth hits front and center with the control model adopted by many organized religions. This gospel, this direct path to self-knowledge and inner divinity, was suppressed precisely because it championed spiritual autonomy, inviting you, the awakened, to seek truth not in dogma, but within the boundless landscape of your own soul.